Imagine a child of just 8 years old solving mathematical equations that would confuse university professors. Now imagine this same child living in a hut without electricity, studying by candlelight after walking 4 miles to school every day. This is the fascinating story of Abiola, the little African genius that no one expected and who brought the world's greatest scientists to tears. What would you do if you discovered that the next brilliant mind capable of revolutionizing modern science was hiding in the most unlikely place on the planet? Welcome to our channel. If you've made it this far, get ready for an inspiring journey that will change your perspective on human potential. Don't forget to leave your like right now and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any extraordinary stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, from what part of the world are you watching this story? Your participation makes all the difference. Abiola was born in a tiny village in rural Tanzania, where most families survived on less than $2 a day. His home was a simple mud and straw structure, shared with his 6 siblings and parents. The nearest luxury was a community well, a 30-minute walk away, from which they carried water every day before dawn. Abiola's father, a local fisherman, barely knew how to read. His mother sold vegetables grown in the small plot behind their home. In a community where only 40% of children completed elementary school, education was seen as a privilege, not a right. From a very young age, Abiola showed an insatiable curiosity. At 3, he was already organizing stones and seeds into complex patterns that puzzled adults. While other children played, he drew geometric figures in the dirt with dry sticks, fascinated by shapes and proportions. The first extraordinary sign appeared when, at 5 years old, Abiola began creating his own advanced counting system. Without any formal math instruction, he developed a unique method for quickly calculating large quantities, leaving the village elders perplexed. He has the gift of the ancestors, the elders would say with a mixture of admiration and caution. In a culture where the unexplainable was often attributed to the supernatural, Abiola's genius generated both fascination and mistrust. At 6, when he finally began attending the only school in the region, an improvised room with a leaky roof and broken benches, Abiola already knew how to count into the thousands and multiply 2-digit numbers mentally. The teacher, Miss Nyota, recalls the first day she met him. He walked into the room with his eyes shining, as if he were entering a palace, not our humble school. Abiola's school supplies consisted of a single notebook, which he protected like treasure, and a pencil cut in half to last longer. Even with such limited resources, he absorbed knowledge like a sponge. While other students struggled to learn the alphabet, Abiola was already solving 4th-grade math problems. The nights in the village were dark and quiet, lit only by stars and occasional oil lamps. After helping with household chores and caring for his younger siblings, Abiola studied by the light of a small candle, carefully rationed to last as long as possible. His parents, despite not fully understanding their son's talent, sacrificed to buy these candles, sensing that their son had a different destiny. It was in this unlikely setting, amid daily hardships and challenges, that the little African genius began his extraordinary journey, a journey that would cross continents and forever change the world of science. No one imagined that the surprise visit of an education inspector would change everything. Mr. Mbeki, a tall man with thick glasses, arrived at the small rural school on a hot October morning. He came to inspect the poor conditions of the place, but ended up witnessing something he would never forget. While observing Ms. Nyota's class, he noticed a skinny boy in the back row. While the other students struggled with basic addition problems, this boy was scribbling furiously in his worn notebook. Curious, Mr. Mbeki approached quietly. "What are you doing, boy?" he asked, expecting to find drawings or doodles. Abiola looked up, unafraid. "I'm trying to find a pattern to predict prime numbers, sir." The inspector froze. Prime numbers? A concept that many college students barely understood? He asked to see the notebook, and what he found made his heart race. Page after page of number sequences, complex patterns and attempts at formulas that an 8-year-old boy simply shouldn't be able to conceive. "Who taught you this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Nobody, sir. I just see the numbers this way." Ms. Nyota approached, explaining how Abiola often solved in minutes problems that she herself needed to consult the manual to correct. He finishes his lessons and then creates his own problems. I tried giving him more advanced exercises, but he soon surpassed everything I can offer. Mr. Mbeki canceled his next visits. Instead, he spent 3 full days testing Abiola with increasingly difficult math problems. The boy solved everything without a calculator, often suggesting more efficient alternative methods. "Do you know that you're special?" the inspector asked on the last day. Abiola shrugged. "We're all special in some way, aren't we? My sister weaves the most beautiful baskets in the village. My friend Jelani can imitate the songs of 20 different birds." This response, as humble as it was profound, convinced Mr. Mbeki that he was looking at not just a mathematical prodigy, but an extraordinary soul. The following week, the inspector returned with 2 university professors. They brought standardized IQ and mathematical aptitude tests. Abiola completed in 30 minutes a test designed for 2 hours. His result, the highest ever recorded in the country's history for his age group. The news spread through the village like wildfire. Some neighbors came to ask the family for blessings. Others kept their distance, frightened by something they didn't understand. Abiola's parents, confused but proud, just wanted the best for their son. On a sunny afternoon, Mr. Mbeki sat with the family under the shade of a mango tree. "Your son has a rare gift," he explained. "There is a special school in the capital. There, he will have books, computers, teachers trained to develop his potential." Abiola's mother squeezed her son's hand. "But he is so small." "You can go too," the inspector assured. "The government will provide housing and work." That night, under the African stars, a family dreamed of a future they had never imagined possible, while a small genius fell asleep thinking not of numbers, but of the adventures that awaited him. Moving to Dar es Salaam was like entering another planet. For a family that had never left their village, the Tanzanian capital was a frightening maze of tall buildings, noisy cars, and strangers who spoke too fast. The 2-bedroom apartment seemed like a palace compared to their old hut, but the closed walls made everyone feel trapped, especially Abiola. At the National Academy for Young Talents, Abiola discovered his first major obstacle. He was different. Not just because of his gift with numbers, but because of his background. While most students came from educated urban families with parents who were doctors, engineers, or politicians, Abiola was the village boy. His worn shoes and simple clothes told a story that some classmates turned into a joke. "Why do you smell like fish?" asked a boy on the first day, causing laughter. Abiola didn't respond. The smell of fish was the smell of his father, his hero, and he would never be ashamed of it. The first weeks were brutal. Although he mastered complex calculations, Abiola barely knew how to use a computer. His English pronunciation caused laughter. In the cafeteria, he sat alone, watching others with their colorful lunchboxes while eating the simple meal his mother prepared. At home, he found his parents struggling with their own challenges. His father, a skilled fisherman for decades, now worked as a night security guard, looking sadly at the distant sea he could see from the apartment window. His mother cleaned houses, returning with cracked hands and tired eyes. One night, Abiola found his father crying silently on the balcony. "Why are you sad, Baba?" The man quickly wiped away his tears. "I'm not sad, son, just missing the starry sky of our village." That night, Abiola made a decision. All of his family's sacrifice needed to be worth it. The next morning, he approached. "The computer teacher, please teach me more. I can stay after class every day." Ms. Kente, surprised by the request, agreed. In 1 month, Abiola not only mastered the computer but was programming small mathematical games. In 2 months, he was speaking English confidently, thanks to extra lessons with the language teacher. When a classmate mocked his clothes, Abiola calmly replied, "In my village, we judge people by their character, not their clothes. How would they judge you there?" The silence that followed was worth more than any response. The real turning point came during the National Mathematics Olympiad. Among competitors from elite schools was Abiola. the only representative from a rural background. When the results were announced, his name was at the top. He didn't just win, he established a new national record. A journalist asked how a boy from such a humble background could outperform students with so many privileges. "Numbers don't care where you come from," Abiola replied with a smile. "They speak to anyone willing to listen." The photo of a dark-skinned boy with a bright smile, holding a trophy almost bigger than him, appeared in newspapers across the country. The headline read, "The future of Tanzania has many names. One of them is Abiola." That same night, his family celebrated with a simple dinner. With tears of pride, his father whispered, "You're not just changing your life, son. You're changing how the world sees us." News of Abiola's victory in the National Olympiad spread through the academic world like an exciting whisper. That's how Dr. Hassan Malik, a Tanzanian researcher working at MIT, discovered the prodigy boy. After reading the article about Abiola, he made a call that would change everything. 3 weeks later, Abiola received an official invitation to participate in the International Symposium of Young Brilliant Minds in London. The letter mentioned covered airfare and accommodation for him and one companion. When he heard the news, Abiola ran 5 blocks to his father's workplace to show him the golden envelope. London, across the ocean, his father held the letter with trembling hands. "My son will cross the sea that I have never seen." The preparation was intense. Abiola got his first passport. A teacher donated a small suitcase. Another helped choose appropriate clothes for the European climate. The entire school mobilized so that their brightest student would represent not just Tanzania, but an entire generation of African children with untapped potential. On the eve of the trip, Abiola couldn't sleep. Sitting by the apartment window, he watched the city lights. "Nervous?" asked his mother, sitting beside him. "What if I'm not good enough, Mama? What if they discover I'm just an ordinary boy?" She took his small hands between her work-calloused ones. "You were born with something special in here." She gently touched his forehead. "But the real value is here." She pointed to his heart. "Show them both." The symposium gathered 20 exceptional young people from around the world, none older than 15. Among cutting-edge equipment and complex mathematical symbols on the boards, Abiola felt momentarily intimidated. His father, wearing his only suit, seemed equally out of place among academics and millionaires. The main challenge was to solve a mathematical problem considered impossible for young minds, a variation of Goldbach's conjecture that had confused mathematicians for decades. Each participant would have 2 hours in an isolated room. When Abiola entered the room, he felt a strange comfort. It was just him and the numbers, like the nights under candlelight in his village. He took a deep breath and let the numbers speak to him, as they always did. After 47 minutes, less than half the time, Abiola pressed the button indicating he had finished. The judges looked at each other skeptically. No one had ever finished so quickly. Many imagined the African boy had given up. Dr. Malik, who was among the judges, personally collected the calculation sheets. As he read, his eyes widened. He urgently called the other evaluators. Soon, 6 of the world's greatest mathematicians were poring over Abiola's notes, murmuring in amazement. The boy hadn't just solved the problem, he had discovered an entirely new approach, elegant in its simplicity. Where others tried to break the problem into smaller parts, Abiola had seen a pattern that no one had noticed, inspired by the traditional geometric patterns of the fabrics from his village. "This changes everything," whispered a judge, a famous Russian mathematician. "How did you think of this?" Abiola shrugged with the characteristic humility of his upbringing. "In my village, we learned that the shortest path between 2 points isn't always a straight line. Sometimes it's a story." In that moment, the room fell silent. Everyone understood that they weren't just witnessing mathematical genius. They were facing a completely new perspective, born in a place that the academic world rarely considered. News about Abiola's revolutionary solutions spread through the symposium like wildfire. The organizers made an unprecedented decision. They changed the schedule to give the young Tanzanian 15 minutes on the main stage in front of all participants. renowned scientists, and the international press. Abiola had never spoken to more than 30 people. Now, he waited backstage in an auditorium with 800 packed seats. His hands were sweating. His heart was beating so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. "I can't do this, Baba," he whispered to his father, who was nervously adjusting his own borrowed tie. His father knelt down, coming to eye level with his son. "Remember the story of the young lion I used to tell you at bedtime?" Abiola nodded. The lion thought he couldn't roar until he needed to protect his family. Then he discovered his voice was there all along. He touched his son's chest. "Your voice is in there. Let it out." The presenter called his name, pronouncing it incorrectly. As Abiola walked to the stage, he heard whispers. "He's just a boy. And so small." Under the bright lights, he saw only a sea of unfamiliar faces, all waiting for him to prove his worth. On the big screen appeared the problem he had solved. Abiola looked at the front row, where 5 Nobel Prize winners were watching him closely. Among them was Dr. Eleanor Hughes, his idol, whose book he had read dozens of times, even struggling with some English words. For a terrible moment, his mind went blank. Then, at the back of the auditorium, he saw his father standing, nodding encouragingly. Next to him, in his imagination, Abiola saw his mother, his siblings, Miss Nyota, and everyone from his village. "I come from a place," he began in a low voice, "where we don't have calculators." Some nervous laughter echoed through the room. "But we have patterns in everything, in how ants build their tunnels, how women weave baskets, how the wind forms, waves in the sand." His voice gained strength. Abiola began to explain his solution, not with the formal language of academia, but through stories and metaphors from his culture. He used examples of how his grandmother calculated proportions for weaving, without ever having studied fractions. He showed how he transformed the abstract problem into something visual, inspired by traditional African kente patterns. As he explained, he drew on the digital board with the confidence of someone chatting with an old friend. The numbers and symbols flowed naturally. The audience, initially skeptical, leaned forward in their chairs, completely absorbed. When he reached the final solution, the auditorium was in absolute silence. Abiola concluded simply, "Numbers are a universal language. They don't know borders. They don't care about the color of your skin or how much money you have. They speak to us if we are willing to listen." Dr. Hughes was the first to stand up. Tears streamed down her face as she applauded. One by one, the scientists rose until the entire auditorium was on its feet in a deafening ovation. Dr. Malik, watching from the corner of the stage, couldn't hold back his tears. "In 40 years in mathematics," he later told a colleague, "I've never seen something so pure, so uncontaminated by the conventions that limit us." When the presenter returned to the stage to thank Abiola, he found the boy looking confused at the teary audience. "Why are they crying?" Abiola asked innocently. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, my young friend," the man replied, his voice breaking. "You did everything right. You just reminded them of why they chose science." In his father's arms backstage, Abiola finally understood. Sometimes, true genius isn't just about solving problems, but about reconnecting us with what makes us human. The days following Abiola's presentation were a whirlwind. Journalists competed for interviews, universities sent representatives, and technology companies offered sponsorships. For a boy who had never appeared on television, seeing his face on international news was surreal. "We need to talk about your future," said Dr. Malik, sitting with Abiola and his father in the London Hotel Garden. "Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, they all want you." Abiola's father, who barely understood what these acronyms meant, held his son's hand firmly. "He's only 10 years old," he said with a steady voice. "He's still a child." "That's exactly why," replied Dr. Malik. His method for solving the conjecture isn't just brilliant. It's revolutionary because it wasn't limited by decades of conventional thinking. He sees patterns that our trained eyes cannot see. The next morning, Abiola was invited to an extraordinary meeting with the International Mathematics Committee. 12 of the greatest living mathematicians gathered in a room to hear an African boy. Dr. Hughes led the session. "Explain again how you visualize the problem," she asked gently. Abiola took colored chalk and began drawing on the blackboard. He didn't use complex equations, but circles and lines that connected in patterns similar to the mats woven in his village. "In my home," he explained, "we learn that everything is connected. What seem to be separate problems are usually different. Faces of the same question. For 3 hours, the scientists observed, questioned, and most importantly, learned." Dr. Chen, famous for his rigidity, removed his glasses with emotion. "I spent 40 years complicating what I should have simplified." At the end of the week, Dr. Hughes announced at a press conference, "We are creating the Abiola Project, a global initiative to identify young talents in neglected regions and give them access to top education, without removing them from their cultural contexts." The real revolution, however, was happening in mathematics departments around the world. The Abiola method, as it was called, wasn't just a technique. It was a philosophy that challenged the dominant Western approach. Universities began rewriting curricula, incorporating diverse perspectives and alternative forms of mathematical visualization. One afternoon, during a rare moment of tranquility in his hotel room, Abiola received a surprise video call. On the screen, dozens of smiling faces squeezed to appear. His classmates from the small school in Tanzania. "You're famous, Abiola," shouted an excited boy. "Our school received new computers because of you." Ms. Nyota appeared in front of the camera. "3 girls from our region now want to be mathematicians," she said with tears in her eyes. "You showed them it's possible." Meanwhile, at MIT, a team of scientists was applying Abiola's method to an artificial intelligence problem that had stagnated for years. At NASA, engineers were revisiting trajectory calculations using his approach. In hospitals, doctors were exploring how his vision of patterns could help in early disease diagnosis. Dr. Malik found Abiola watching stars from the hotel window. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Home," the boy replied. "Those stars are the same ones I see from my village." The scientist smiled. "Did you know your work is helping astronomers better understand those very stars?" Abiola turned, surprised. "How? Your way of seeing patterns is changing much more than mathematics. It's changing how we see the universe." Dr. Malik placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "But most importantly, it's changing how the world sees Africa, not as a place that needs to be saved, but as a place that can save us, with perspectives we lost long ago." That night, Abiola slept peacefully, dreaming not of formulas or equations, but of children like him across the continent, waiting only for a chance to show the world their own unique patterns. 5 years have passed since that historic presentation in London. The morning sun illuminates a modern building that contrasts with the simple houses around it. The Abiola Innovation Center, built where there was once just an empty field, shines. Like a beacon of hope in the small Tanzanian village, Abiola, now 15 years old and a few inches taller, walks through corridors filled with children. Some work on advanced computers, others manipulate 3-dimensional models, all with the same sparkle in their eyes that he once had. "Professor Abiola," calls a girl with colorful braids, holding up a tablet. "I solved it!" He smiles, examining. The girl's solution to a quantum physics problem that adult scientists would find challenging. "Excellent, Zuri. But try to visualize it differently. Imagine the electron not as a particle, but as a story unfolding." Refusing million-dollar offers to study exclusively at the world's best universities, Abiola chose a different path. With help from the Hughes Malik Foundation, created in his honor, he studies remotely at 5 different universities while teaching in his home village 3 days a week. "Genius is not the exclusive property of any continent," he declared in his speech at the center's inauguration. "It's hidden in Brazilian favelas, Indian villages, Peruvian mountains. We just need the right eyes to see it." The impact of his story transcended mathematics. African governments reshaped educational policies, focusing on identifying talents in rural areas. A network of centers similar to his spread across the continent, connected by cutting-edge technology and a simple philosophy. The best ideas are born when we unite traditional knowledge and modern science. His parents, who initially feared fame, would change their son, now lead community programs at the center. His father teaches young people how local fishermen's navigation knowledge contains advanced principles of geometry. His mother coordinates a project documenting traditional farming methods that scientists discovered are surprisingly effective against climate change. On a special afternoon, the small auditorium of the center is packed. Local families mix with international visitors, scientists, educators, philanthropists. In the front row sit Dr. Hughes, Dr. Malik, and other names that once seemed unreachable. Abiola takes the stage with 3 children from Tanzania, Haiti, and Nepal. Together, they present their collaborative research on mathematical patterns in global textile traditions, work that has just gained recognition from the International Association of Applied Mathematics. When I was 5 years old, concludes Abiola, I drew shapes in the dirt with sticks because I had no paper. Today, those same shapes are helping develop algorithms that predict earthquakes and save lives. His voice breaks as he continues. The real miracle isn't that an African child can be a genius. The miracle is that we're finally learning to hear all voices, to value all perspectives. Because the hardest problems in our world won't be solved by a single type of intelligence, but by the mosaic of all our ways of thinking. The audience rises in applause, many with tears in their eyes. Among them, his former schoolmates, now university students, living futures that once seemed impossible. That night, Abiola sits on the same hill where he used to study by starlight. But now, he is not alone. Hundreds of dreaming young people around the world follow in his footsteps, each carrying their own unique brightness, waiting only for a chance to light the way for all of us. And what did you think of this incredible story? The little African genius reminds us that human potential is everywhere, just waiting for an opportunity to blossom. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of the next inspiring stories we have to share. Amazing stories that make us believe in the best of humanity. Leave a comment telling us which part moved you the most.